let's talk about marking the garment for your first row of spaghetti bias loops. This is just a block that we have for demonstration, but imagine that this is the straight edge of your pants leg, or the bottom of a skirt, or a shirt or something. What you're going to want to do for your markings is use a water soluble marker. Don't use air soluble. You're going to end up working too fast because it'll fade. So you're going to mark your seam lines that go on the side. What we suggest that you do in the article is you're going to sew like your front and your back piece together. So this seam line you won't see because it will be sewn. So you have your seam line. The first marking you're going to do after the seam line is you're going to come in a quarter inch from the raw edge and draw your stitching line. Also, you're going to come in from the raw edge 3/4 of an inch, and this is your reference line that helps you to get the correct height on each of your spaghetti bias loops. After that, you're going to want to mark at inch intervals along the bottom edge of your garment. Next, after we've gotten our garment marked, we're ready to lay down some Wonder Tape. And I like to place that right over the stitching line. Once you pull the paper backing up and start working with it, you'll be able to see the stitching line through the through the Wonder Tape itself. We prepared our garment with our markings and our Wonder Tape, and so now we're ready to start working our first loops. What I like to do is to tear off about 6 to 10 inches of the paper backing of the Wonder Tape. That way it's out of your way, but you still have the rest of it covered. That keeps it from getting dust or thread or kids' fingers stuck on the tape while you're working with it. Then you're going to take your bias tubing and look for the little seam line. You're going to lay that face up, and it's going to start off next to your seam, and you're going to adhere it to the Wonder Tape. And what I like about Wonder Tape is that it stays nice and tacky, and so that you don't have to wait for it to dry while you're working your project. Then you're going to take your loop and your bead, and you're going to bring it up and rest it on your reference line. So this gives you the height of your first loop. Keeping this seam up towards you, come to the next marking and lay it right beside the marking. So there's your first loop. I like to keep the bias tape, the bias tubing at this point continuous. In the article, we tell you can work it all as one, or you can trim as you go. So I suggest you work a few loops first and then trim it off if you like. And don't worry about the little part that's sticking off at the end here, because you will trim that later. And you'll just keep working your beads down. You lay your bead on your reference line, and then this next one goes right next to your next inch mark. So this is how you do your loops. You're going to continue to do this until you have all your loops placed all the way around the edge of your garment. And the next thing I'll show you is how to place either a lining or your facing down over the loops. So now we have our loops in place, and if you notice, the beads are lying quite nicely along our 3/4 inch reference line. And this will help you to have the proper height on your loops from your stitching line. So on your garment, if you have just a flat edge, like say your pants leg or the bottom of a skirt, a straight skirt, then you may want to use a facing. And so on the garment that we did for the article, the upper part of the top used a lining, and the bottom part used a facing technique. So here's our facing, and we're going to use our Wonder Tape. We're going to get the edge of the facing properly aligned with the raw edge of the garment, and we're just going to tack it down using our Wonder Tape. So we won't have to pin when we get ready to do our stitches, because this Wonder Tape is going to hold it down quite nicely. So we're just going to press it down. So after we've done that, we're going to do a 1/4 inch stitch line to make sure everything is stitched properly in place. One thing you might want to think about when you're doing this line is you have beads that are coming up here. You may want to use a zipper foot to do your 1/4 inch, or if you have a 1/4 inch quilting foot has a smaller foot plate, you may want to use that to do it, because you won't be bumping up against the beads as much. After you've sewn your 1/4 inch stitching line, you can trim off your loops. Once you've trimmed off your loops, you're going to turn your fabric, and I would suggest ironing down the stitching line so that you get a nice straight line. After you've ironed it down, you've formed your first row of loops. Or if you're just using this as an edging, you formed your edging.